Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Vihari. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to another interview on Books Are the Basis, the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, organized by the ISKCON Ministry of Education. And we are very happy and honored to have with us today His Grace Krishna Dharma Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. My obeisances.
Thank you very much for joining us in this series of interviews with senior devotees. Krishna Dharma Prabhu, of course, he's well known as an author, and we will talk about this. Krishna Dharma Prabhu was born in 1955 in London, and I think you served as a merchant navy officer, is that right, as a young man?
That's right, yeah.
And then you came in touch with the devotees in the age of 24 in 1979, came in touch with the Bhaktivedanta Manor. And later on in 1986, you established a temple in Manchester in England. You also served there as a temple president till 2001. You also served as a national secretary of ISKCON UK for 10 years. But as I mentioned, you're also well known in the ISKCON world as the author of Mahabharata and Ramayana, which are best-selling English editions of these epics. They also have been translated into many languages, I think 12 languages or so. Yeah. We have them also here. And you also regularly broadcast for BBC Radio. You write articles, very active author, and you live in London. You're married with your wife Chintamani Dam Devidas. You have 3 kids. And also you have a very interesting initiative called Improving Sadhu Sangha, and we also like to talk about that. So all your life is always centered around books, Srila Prabhupada's books, and writing and reading, and so I'm very excited to have you with us. So let's start with maybe hearing about your journey. How did you join, and which were the first books you read, and how did that have an effect in your life?
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm honored to be here with you and sharing my journey and mission and everything. I initially, I was, as you say, I was in the Merchant Navy. I had some contact in the 70s, early 70s, mid 70s with devotees selling me books. I didn't have any idea what it was about or who they were. I think I got a nectar of instruction at one point, and I had no idea really what it was about. I found it fascinating, but I couldn't really penetrate it. You know, it was too much for my brain at the time. You know, but I was on a bit of a spiritual search, and I kind of knew about the devotees, and but I felt they were a little too kind of weird for me, you know. Their general appearance. I'd seen the Harinams in London, and you know, I thought, whoosh, these guys are too far out, you know. And I also knew that they were following some rather severe principles, which I didn't find very attractive.
Okay.
But I knew they were, you know, genuine spiritual people. But then in 1979, cut a long story short, I was hitchhiking with my girlfriend at the time, and I'd kind of reached the end of my material life. You know, I was at that point an existential crisis. Who am I? Why am I here? What's going on? You know, I'd done all the usual things that you do, you know, as a young hippie type guy at the time. You know, and then I got picked up by a Prabhupada disciple. As I was standing hitching, we were waiting. I remember standing in the rain for an hour and no one stopped. And then suddenly this van stopped, and it was Eastern Arts on the side of it. I thought, that looks interesting. He asked me, where are you going? I said, well, I don't really know. Essentially, I was at that point, you know, didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. But I said, I'm looking for some spiritual people. And he said, oh, really? Maybe I can help. You know, and he was actually his name was Hetu Das. He was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He's left his body now, but effectively he picked me up and took me to the manor. It said, you know, see what you think of this. And I was really impressed by the devotees. In fact, just before that, whilst we were traveling and driving, it was a long way. We were way down on the south coast somewhere. He gave me a book. He said, "Can you read this book to me?" And it was on his dashboard, and it was the Gita, Prabhupada's Gita. And I began reading it, and it was like bombs going off in my head at that point. Never was there a time when you did not exist, nor I, nor all the, I was like, whoa, what's this? He started explaining it a bit to me, then took me to the manor. And then when I actually met the devotees face to face, I found out, well, actually they're kind of normal, they're all right, despite the strange appearance. And within a week, I myself had shaved my head and put on the dhoti and everything. They said to me, "You're lucky you've just come at the time when our course is about to start," which I think they said that to everyone. Doesn't matter when you turned up, you could turn up anytime. So I moved in, and I left my girlfriend, quit everything right there and then on the spot, and yeah, the rest is history.
How do you explain to yourself that you all of a sudden became so convinced? We often hear this about the early devotees, like, nowadays it doesn't happen so often anymore.
No. Well, I had a lot of questions. I was quite well educated. I'd read a lot of books, and I had a bit of a scientific inclination, but I wasn't atheistic. I thought I was. I pretended to be, but you know what it's like. In my heart, I was, praying to God. God help me, someone now, help me, because I was suffering, and so I was open to the theistic message, and then there was devotees who's at that time. There was a devotee called Rohini Nandan Prabhu and Batu Gopal, his Prabhupada disciple, Vipramukhya, and they just, they loved it. I had all these questions, and I was very, very enthusiastic to find out more, and they could answer them. Whatever I asked, they answered, and I was impressed. I hadn't seen that before. I tried previously. I'd spoken to Christians actually at one point, but they had no answers at all. I'm sure some of them do, but the ones I met just couldn't answer my questions. But the devotees did, and I was impressed.
You also mentioned that that first reading of Bhagavad Gita was also quite impressive. Was the Bhagavad Gita the first book that you started to study and?
Yeah, that was when I think I read The Science of Self-Realization when I came to the temple. They gave me that to read. And that was I didn't just dive into the Bhagavad Gita immediately. It was the book that I read that initially had that powerful impact on me. But when I actually arrived at the temple, they gave me that SSR. And I think that was the one that mostly began to really, like, wow, convince me that this is what I'm looking for, essentially.
Yeah. Do you remember what was the culture of reading in these early days at that time? Did you read a lot, or it was more?
No, I don't. It wasn't so much the culture at the time. To be honest with you, I listened to a lot of lectures. At that time, Prabhupada's tapes, they were available, and I quickly kind of got into those. And Prabhupada's lectures were just, to me, they were just incredible. I just love them so much, really. His whole delivery and everything was the thing that has sustained me, because I don't know if you know the history. I was initiated by a couple of the zonal acharyas who subsequently left, but my anchor was Prabhupada and his books. I was obviously studying them at the time, but the culture was not so much centered around that, hearing and chanting and reading the books. But the devotees always had time for me. The ones who were in charge of the programs there, the Back to program or what have you. And any discussion on the philosophy I wanted to have, they were ready. And as I say, they because I have a very inquisitive nature. I mean, tell you one little anecdote. My wife Chintamani Dham and I, were always in classes. This is Bhagavan. We're always asking questions, and then when he decided to arrange some marriages, he said, "Okay, these two can start associating with each other because they can ask each other their questions, and that will save me from having to answer so many questions." That worked out quite well,
well,
actually.
wow, that's good to hear that sometimes these kind of matches also worked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That was a success story, that one. Yeah.
Okay, so but you, on a personal level, you kind of really found shelter in Prabhupada's books also over the years when
I
going
did.
through different stages and different difficulties.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I did indeed. Yeah, and my wife too.
yeah, yeah.
That's been our real support and succor, and now we are very much, as you say, promoting it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, great. Maybe we can start with a general question. So, what are the benefits of reading Prabhupada's books regularly? What would you say, just in general?
Okay, I
Why
mean,
should
if
we
you,
read?
reading Prabhupada's books means associating with the Mahabhagavat. There's no difference between the person, the book Bhagavat, and the person Bhagavat are the same, as Prabhupada says. And, either one of them or both of them is sufficient. He writes that in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. And so you're getting his direct association if you read his books and assimilate, try to really assimilate the messages deeply. Um, it's essential to one's spiritual practice. Prabhupada says that the secret of success is to hear from the right person. And Prabhupada is undoubtedly the right person. There may be other right persons out there, but we'll all agree that Srila Prabhupada is certainly the self-realized topmost Bhagavat devotee, and to hear from such a person is key to one's spiritual life. That is something that by which you will make the most advancement. So yeah, I think it's something that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, we need to do that on a regular basis, every day, at least twice a day, as he said, the ISKCON sandwich, and more if possible. I mean, he initially had a program where he was doing the League of Devotees. They were studying for like 3 hours a day or more, reading Shastra together, hearing and chanting, and he wanted that. And even in ISKCON, he recommended that. If you can do that, he said, if you could read 8 hours a day, that would be okay. That would be service. Yeah, it's just we're not able to do it. That's the only problem. If you can do it, you don't have to do anything else. That's all you have to do. You can achieve perfection simply by hearing, and that's a fact.
Mm. So you're saying the main reason for reading is this connection with the Mahabhagavat, with feeling Prabhupada's presence through his books. Would you like to share? Do you have some, like, I'm sure you have, but you like to share some personal realization how you, or maybe what is the proper attitude in order to experience Prabhupada in his books?
Okay, yeah, the proper attitude. I mean, since about 20 years or more, let's think, my wife and I have been discussing the books together.
Mm-hmm.
And this came about because when I was the temple president in Manchester, I was going to the temple all the time and to be with the devotees and run the temple. And my wife we had 3 children. So with one child, she was okay coming with me and everything. 2 children that had to stop. 3 kids, she was really struggling. Her sadhana really diminished, and she began to suffer and begin to lose her faith even. So she was in a very difficult situation. But I kept trying to encourage her. Eventually, I realized that I needed to pull away a bit from the temple and really spend more time with her and do my sadhana with her. So we began to do the morning programs together, and then we started discussing the books together because I'd been playing Prabhupada's lectures to her, and from listening to Prabhupada's lectures, she began to realize that that what she needs to do is to really study the books more deeply. It became very clear to her. So she started to do that. But when she did that, because of her weak faith, it began to bring all these questions and doubts up. And she became really, some of the things that Srila Prabhupada said, she found very difficult to accept. And when I, used to come home and then sit down with her, what about this? That can't be right. How can he say that? So I said, well, hang on. So let's talk about this. See if we can understand more deeply what he's trying to say here. And so from that we began to go more deeply into Prabhupada's words together, and we began this process of discussing his books. I think that's the secret to really unlocking the messages. He says that in the Bhagavad Gita that the messages of Krishna are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized when they're discussed, when we discuss discuss it together with other devotees. In the Bhagavatam, Satang Prasangam Mama Virya Samvida, that verse that in the association of pure devotees, the messages of Krishna are very relishable. And as a result of that discussion, then you begin to awaken Shraddha, Rati, Bhakti, Anukramishiti, one after another, all of faith, attachment to Krishna, and then love of God. It comes by discussing the philosophy, but it has to be done in a very disciplined way. It can't be done, like we have discussions which are like Jalpa or Vitanda, where we fight. I've got a position, he's got a position, and then we just, two heads come together, and we're just trying to, maintain our own stance, our own position, that we're not going to change. I'm fully convinced that women cannot be Diksha Gurus. No, they definitely can. Right, bang, the fight goes on. And neither side is attempting to understand the other. So Vada discussions, on the other hand, where we're trying to reach the truth. Krishna says that is my vibhuti. I am the conclusive truth of discussions. So that is where we really start to get into the messages and assimilate them, really begin to get the realizations. So to me, I think reading on your own is okay, but Prabhupada said reading is not enough. You also have to repeat. Hearing alone is not enough. You have to repeat the messages. So this is what we're advocating, that we come together and we read together in the sense that we discuss and we repeat the messages, repeat Prabhupada's words, understand them, put it in our own words, and then if it brings up any doubts, questions, explore those in relation to Prabhupada's words. But everything is focused around the book. It's not, wow, this reminds me of something, and we go off on our own sort of flight of imaginative rhetoric of some sort, which sticks very closely to Prabhupada's words. What is he saying? Why is he saying this? What does he want me to do as a result of knowing this? Does it raise any doubt? Does it contradict anything else I've read? And in that sort of way, we churn Prabhupada's books, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing your personal journey towards this. And I guess this is what brought you to this initiative of improving our Sangha.
That's right.
You have a beautiful webpage, and there we find 16 principles that you suggest that devotees should apply. It's all about hearing and reading Prabhupada's books and discussing, as you just beautifully described. And then also you promote 18 useful tips. Would you like to share a bit about these principles and these tips, and how did you came up with this, and what you like to promote or share with the devotees with this initiative?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Prabhu. Yes, it's improvingsangha.com. So where did that come from? Well, that evolved over the years as we heard from Srila Prabhupada, as we read his books, and we began to glean out these different messages that he was giving us. Consistently, he tells us to discuss his books, and on the website, you'll find many statements that we've quoted there, where you can see. And he stresses that we need to discuss. And the 16 principles. So the first one is that to read Prabhupada's purports. Because why? Because another message that consistently comes across here from a liberated pure devotee of Krishna. So that we obviously know that's Srila Prabhupada. And the topmost benediction for those living in this material world and are subjected to birth and death is associating with pure devotees. One should search out such pure devotees and remain with them. That will make one completely happy, even though living within the material world. So how can you remain with a pure devotee? Even if you have a spiritual master, you can never, no one's going to you're lucky if you see him twice a year sometimes. So, but with Srila Prabhupada, he's there. He's given himself to us through his books, so we can constantly be with him and associate with him. So that was the first principle. And then discussing, as I've been emphasizing, there are so many places where Prabhupada said that. It's like be engaged always in reading the Bhagavatam, discussing amongst yourself. Then you'll make progress. Otherwise, if you take it as an official routine work, you should take it as a routine work, but with the consciousness that we have to learn something. So what is the value of this association? Satsanga. Satsanga means assembly. This was in a class one time. He was speaking, and then devotees were getting up to go out, and then Prabhupada said, "No, you don't understand." He's stressing the importance of hearing. If you don't do that, then you'll just lose interest in everything. You won't be able to maintain your spiritual life. So, when you've got this center, it's not that you should be engaged morning till you go to bed for sense gratification. That is not life. That is karmi life. You have no time for satsanga. You cannot make any progress by this sort of karmi life. We have to work for organization, but not the whole day and night engaged in no satsanga. That is a misguided policy, and it will spoil the whole structure. So, he was very, very strong on the point that we need to be regularly hearing. Here's the quotes that I was reading you earlier, that discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. One must learn detachment by discussing the spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's from the Gita purport of 15.3. So yeah, discuss the spiritual science based on authoritative scripture, hear from a person in knowledge. So that really sums up the model that we've created and that we're trying to promote. That we come together to discuss based on authoritative scriptures. So Prabhupada's books are the central focus of our discussion, and we're hearing from a person who's actually in knowledge, and that's Prabhupada. Sometimes we hear like, "Oh, you've got to hear from the living Bhagavat," but I think this term is misunderstood. Because when Prabhupada uses the term living Bhagavat, he doesn't mean someone in the flesh who's wandering around on the face of the earth. He means someone whose life is the Bhagavat, who lives the Bhagavat, who is a personal Bhagavat. So that is Prabhupada. He's the book. He's the person Bhagavat in the book Bhagavat. So we have this wonderful opportunity. It's like it's unprecedented. What acharya previously has ever given us such an opportunity like this, that he's presented us with all these wonderful books. They're like gold mines. When you go to those books and you start churning the purports, all these diamonds and gold nuggets come out. It's unbelievable. And things you never knew, and things you thought you knew, and then you find out, oh, I didn't really understand that, properly. It becomes more and more apparent and revealed as you dive deeply into Prabhupada's books. Do you want me to keep speaking? I can just run through the principles if you like, Prabhu.
We can hear about the principles, and it's very encouraging to hear your enthusiasm.
And these are all the points that Prabhupada stressed in terms of how to read his books.
Yeah.
And a good resource where you can find all of this is the prabhupadvani.com. I think you know about it. There he's also compiled all of the different, I think, 60 ways by which we should read, Prabhupada said, by which we should read the books. So here are the key ones that we've compiled on our website. Read the purports, discuss them regularly. So this is another important instruction, that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So that means every day, basically, in simply, that so if we hear daily, regularly, this is Prabhupada, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, then Nasta Preshu Bhadreshu, your heart will be purified. So yeah, read our books regularly and discuss them. We should discuss the Bhagavatam daily as much as possible, and then everything will be clarified. For Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedic literature. So that's another important principle. Systematically. So this is another thing Prabhupada stresses, that we need to go through it in a systematic way. That means first the Bhagavad Gita, then the Bhagavatam, and then the CC. I think we all know that. But it doesn't mean that, I just, well, I've read the whole Gita, now I'm ready for the Bhagavatam. Well, I've read the whole Bhagavatam, now I'm ready for the CC. Because the books have a potency, as I was mentioning earlier, that he writes in the Bhagavad Gita that they're full of potencies, and they can be unlocked if we discuss it together. So what are those potencies that he's talking about? Well, it means that the heart will become purified and will gradually become free of material desires, of sense, for sense gratification. Our attraction for Krishna, rati, will awaken, and we'll lose interest in other things, time-wasting things like watching YouTube videos, or talking about politics, or watching the sport, and that kind of thing. So when we feel that diminishing, and we rather than doing that, we would prefer to hear and chant about Krishna, then we know that yes, the potencies are working on me. It actually says in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes in the preface of the Bhagavatam that by the time that it's so arranged in such a way that by the time you reach the end of the 9th canto, you should be a self-realized soul. You should be God-realized, ready for the 10th canto, because you can't enter into the 10th canto unless you're actually God-realized. So the way I understand it, that systematically, is that yes, you can keep reading. You can certainly read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but don't give up your study of the Gita. Don't give up your regular systematic study. Prabhupada established that morning and evening. So come together and study the Bhagavatam in the morning, the Gita at night. Discuss it. So one of the problems we have, I think, personally, with classes at the moment is that they're passive hearing. That you sit down and a person gives the podium lecture for perhaps up to an hour, and it's very difficult to hear. I've been in so many classes, come out at the end, spoken to the devotees. Well, Prabhu, what do you think of the class? Wow, wonderful class. Yeah, well, what were the key points that you picked up? Yeah, well, yeah, it was great. And you just can't remember. Lucky they might remember one point or something like that. Because you're not engaging with the subject. You're not, the speaker is, that's wonderful. He's, prepared his class and giving the class, and he's fully engaged. But you've got your audience there, yourself, you look around and they're nodding off, they're watching their phones, they're talking or doing something. But we need discussion where you can involve everyone in reading the books, in actually giving their understandings of the purports. Focus it around Srila Prabhupada and go through it systematically, verse by verse. It's like, and that's, I think, is the systematic thing, that we go through it and we unlock those potencies. It actually writes in the 2nd canto that if you shouldn't go beyond the 2nd canto if you haven't given up sex life. So, okay, we can read beyond it, but if I'm still afflicted by sex life, then I need to be really going more deeply into those early cantos. And there's so much there. I mean, can you imagine, like the first verse of the first canto, right? Where the purport. How many pages is it? How can you give a class on that in one day, in 1 hour? You know, you need to go through that and take it chunk by chunk and go deeply into it and unlock it in order to get the benefit. There's so much benefit to be had from Prabhupada's books if we do it the way he told us, regularly, systematically, and we repeat. Here's some statements to that effect there, where Srila Prabhupada says the importance of it. When we will learn something, we have to repeat it, even in material things. And what to speak of spiritual? That's a lecture. Hearing is solidified by the process of chanting. One who has heard perfectly from the perfect source becomes convinced about the all-pervading personality of Godhead, and thus becomes enthusiastic in glorifying the Lord. You must all study all of the books so that when the need arises, you can repeat in your own words their purport. Just read from this is different times when Prabhupada said this. Just read from my books and try and explain the meaning in your own words. Chant Hare Krishna mantra day and night. Read the books and express the philosophy in your own words. So that's what we're trying to do with the discussions, that we we read something, may just be one sentence. Maybe we look for Prabhupada's point. Sometimes it's half a sentence. Like every day I discuss with my wife twice a day. We sit down, we do the Bhagavatam in the morning, Gita at night. And as we go through the purports, line by line, sometimes we find one word, that we go, it just unlocks a whole discussion. Always a sentence or two will do that. And bring out that meaning. So then it's put it in your own words, so that you're really not just repeat it like a parrot. And you'll find statements where Prabhupada says, don't repeat like a parrot. That you should, it's not that in order not to change the meaning, I simply repeat word for word exactly what's been said. No, I have to assimilate the meaning myself and then speak it myself in my own words. And that shows that, yes, I've understood it. There's a famous quote from Einstein. He said that if you've really understood something, you can explain it so that your grandmother can understand it. So with Prabhupada's books, it should be like that you've really got the point and you can put it very nicely, and in your own words. Yes, so that's another principle then. Scrutinize. Yeah. So this is another thing that I was just mentioning, that, Srila Prabhupada said, just try to understand each word. Each word is meaningful. Prabhupada, first of all, try to understand one word, please. One word. If you understand, your life will be successful. Therefore, you will find in the Bhagavatam, each word is transcendental. Each word is full of meaning and transcendental knowledge, because the writer, composer of this book is Vyasadeva. He is perfect. Vyasadeva, perfect in perfect Vedic knowledge. So this is another principle, the sixth one of the 16, scrutinize. The next one is very, very important. Don't debate. No, we like to debate. But Prabhupada said that, Krishna consciousness is not a debate club. It's a good quote there. Srimad Bhagavatam is as great as Krishna, the Supreme Lord and shelter of everything. In each and every verse of the Bhagavatam and in each and every syllable, there are various meanings. I am very much stressing nowadays that my students shall increase their reading of my books and try to understand them from different angles of vision. Each sloka can be seen from many, many angles of vision. So become practiced in seeing things like this. Actually, Vedic scripture is Krishna Katha, topics about Krishna. And Krishna Katha is not a subject matter for a debate club. It is meant for the devotees. So, this is what I was saying earlier, that we have these jalpa discussions, which mean an argument, basically. But Prabhupada's telling us, well, there are different perspectives. And I think we need to learn how we can live together and accept the fact that I may not see things in exactly the same way as you. I don't see the things in exactly the same way as I saw them 20 years ago. And I'll probably see them differently in 20 years from now. And that's okay, because different parts of Shastra are appropriate for different kinds of people on different parts of the journey, and according to their different status of life. What's appropriate for a very elevated sannyasi renunciate is not appropriate for a householder. So we need the intelligence to be able to discern what is actually appropriate, what's not. And also, I think we need the tolerance and the wisdom to accept that others may have a different perspective on some philosophical point. Did we fall from Vaikuntha or not? Okay, someone thinks we did, someone thinks we didn't. Doesn't matter. It's okay. We can get on with that. We can still carry on and live together. And we can find in Prabhupada's books justification for the different perspectives. And that's why we get the fights, because people are pulling out all the quotes that support their side of the argument, and someone else has got all the quotes that support their side of the argument. But we need to realize the Vedas are like a desire tree, and there's different things in there for different kinds of people, and there's certain fundamental things that are unchangeable. That's okay, but at the same time, different perspectives. Prabhupada stresses this again and again, so that's another very important principle in our view. Are you okay, Prabhu? Is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, that certainly would be much more a sattvic or brahminical approach of discussion. As you mentioned before, if we learn to appreciate the other person's viewpoint and not only appreciate but understand that there is also meaning and value in that. It's not just the way I see it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very good point for understanding their point of view, because part of the process of discussing that we do is that when I say I give my understanding of Srila Prabhupada, the other person will reflect that back to me, and understand me, and then the protocol we use is the etiquette. Would you like to say anything else? So then the person who's speaking, it's a bit like the old Indian, the American Indians. They had the talking stick. Whoever held the talking stick was allowed to speak, and no one else could speak until he handed the stick to someone else. So in the discussion, we work like that. When it's your turn to speak, the other person will simply understand you until you've said everything you wanted to say. And then, you may have a difference of opinion. Then the other person will say, well, my understanding is a little different. And then it's your partner's turn to understand you. And when they understand you, quite often, when we understand each other, your own understanding may actually change. But no one's forcing you to change it. No one's telling you you're wrong. We never use language like that. It's just, okay, well, I see it from I have a different light on this. I have a different perspective on this. And then you share that perspective. And then the person who may at that point be disagreeing with you is obliged to understand you and to repeat back what you're saying in their own words. So they enter into your understanding. And in that way, quite often it resolves itself. And the apparent conflict, because a Vada discussion is going towards the truth.
Yeah.
So it will arrive at the truth, and you'll both be okay with that, even if one of you has had to change your idea, change what you thought you knew. If you see what I mean.
Because both parties are open to actually learn from the other, and are they really want to understand. In this way, this is possible.
Absolutely, and this is something that Prabhupada also said, that we are equals when it comes to a philosophical discussion. We're equals, and there can't be a hierarchy in this method. It's like I have to subordinate my view to someone because they're more advanced than me, or they're higher than I am in the pecking order. They've been around for 5 more years than me, so they're senior devotee. No, in a discussion, it's like even Srila Prabhupada said, now you have heard, and now you should ask yourself, do I agree? Do I agree with what Swami is saying? This is in 1968. He said this. Do I or don't I? You have got intelligence. You have got, use your intelligence. Ask questions. Don't just accept it. Don't be blind. And that's Prabhupada himself saying, if you don't agree with me, and that's what he said, if you don't agree, do I agree? Don't I agree? Then that's fine if you don't agree. Let's discuss it and bring out the questions, bring out the doubts, bring out the confusions. Another powerful thing that occurs when you do that is if I read something and then it brings up a doubt in me, oh, how could Srila Prabhupada say women are less intelligent? You know, that I'm a woman. I don't think I'm less intelligent. Is every woman less intelligent than every man? I mean, is that what he means? Is a Brahmin woman less intelligent than a Shudra man? So on, so on. You know, all the different doubts come up. And then you begin to discuss that together. In the light of Shastra, you refer to other statements that Srila Prabhupada has made. Um, and then, you know, the person who's expressed the doubt is understood by their partner. Then their partner says, do you have an answer to your own question? Do you have a light on your own doubt? And that makes them think, oh, wait a minute, let me think about it. And they really have to think deeply about what's been said there. And can they answer it themselves? And often they can, you know, once the process of discussion has been taking place. And when you answer your own doubt, it's gone. You know, it's not like someone has said, you know, a person convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You know, someone has told me, no, you're wrong. How, you don't understand. Prabhupada doesn't mean that. He means this. Yeah, and then the other person says, yeah, but, oh, I don't know. You know, they're still doubtful because they haven't come to that realization themselves, that conclusion. That has to come from them, not from another person. So this process of discussion facilitates that, brings that out.
So basically, that kind of supportive environment helps the person to learn to think for themselves and make their own realizations.
Absolutely, yes. Think for themselves, Prabhu. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're trying to do. You know, cultivate independent thoughtfulness, to use that faculty of the brain, which I'm sorry to say, in passive hearing doesn't happen. You know, if you're sitting there and you've got a person speaking didactically from the podium, and you may accept them as an authority, and that's okay. But then you're just going to be assimilating, you know, trying at least just to hear from them. And it's passive, and you're not engaging with the subject. I mean, I used to get so frustrated in classes because they'd speak, and I, well, wait, hang on a second, I've got a question about that. No, I don't agree with that. But there's no time, you know, the speaker goes on till the end. Some speakers don't give any time for questions, because they you know, I spoke to one senior devotee, spiritual master and everything. He said, I don't take questions anymore because I just get all these random questions that waste my time. You know, okay, fair enough. But I mean, really, I'm not joking. And I spoke to another one recently. He said, I've stopped giving classes. You know, he has actually stopped giving classes for the same reason. You know, he thinks it's a waste of time. But it's not a waste of time if we do it in a nice way, in a proper way, where we actually engage with the subject together. But, you know, at the end of the class, there may be time for questions, 5 minutes, you know, 10 minutes, perhaps, sometimes longer. But often they'll go off on a tangent. That, you know, someone will ask a random question about some peripheral point that the speaker has made. Prabhupada would give class, and quite often he would stop the person. Why did you ask that question? What is it to you if I tell you, you know, have I seen Indra? Well, you know, someone asked him that question. You know, and if I say yes, then what? And if I say no, you know, you know, it's like all these different questions that come out, and so it can be quite frustrating experience. I used to find that, but the discussions are very satisfying. This is the thing. Satang prasangam mamavirisam. You know, it's satisfying to the heart. Bhavanti Hritkana, you know, you get that pleasure in the heart. So, and satisfaction, which is difficult to get when you're just sitting in a class with lots of people and one person speaks. So that's why, I mean, okay, maybe there's a place for that. I'm not wanting to say, no, stop those lectures. Okay, those lectures can be very nice. But there needs to be time given where we can discuss Prabhupada's books together. There really does. That's ISKCON, actually. That's what ISKCON means. ISKCON doesn't mean we all come around and talk about, you know, what we're going to have for prasadam and who's going to clean the temple. You know, that's a management meeting. ISKCON means where we come together and study the books. If you look it up on the database and see what Prabhupada said about it, that's how he defines it. So we need time for that, where we actually come together and deeply discuss Prabhupada's books. Otherwise, we're going to be suffering. So many people go through their spiritual life, they come out the other end 10 years, 15 years down the line, wondering what went wrong. What is the attrition rate amongst devotees? You know as well as I do. How many that you knew when you were younger, where are they now? The question we often ask, right? Because we haven't connected with the pure devotee and heard from him. This is the key to spiritual advancement. It really is. So, we are very, very enthusiastic to promote this this process of
Yeah.
discussing Prabhupada's books.
So you would say those who have maybe left the movement at some point, they were not spiritually nourished enough from this kind of association, from hearing, because they didn't develop that higher taste, and at some point they left.
Certainly, Prabhu, that some of them, and I think many of them, it's like that. Because we've experienced that, if they haven't completely lost their faith, because some of them just lose it completely. But, we've been in touch with devotees that they haven't completely lost their faith. They know that something's there in Krishna consciousness, but they just didn't quite get it. It's like, and then we begin to train them in this process of how to actually associate with Srila Prabhupada regularly, systematically, deeply, discuss his books. And they begin to change. They begin to, wow, they feel a healing begin to occur, and their faith begins to deepen. Shraddha Rati, the Shraddha begins, Shraddha Rati Bhakti Anukta, it begins to deepen by that process. And it's like, yeah, it is a missing factor, I think, for many of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember speaking to Keshav Bharati Prabhu, who was also very keen on book reading. And some years ago, he told me, he said, looking around me, he says, all the people that I see who are still around are the ones who seriously studied Prabhupada's books, who took reading seriously. So
it's very much into reading,
yeah,
looking at himself.
that's right. Yeah. So please, your listeners, please listen to, have a look at the website. I mean, I haven't been through all 16 principles, but those are some of the key ones that I've mentioned there.
We can put the link underneath this video, and then devotees can check it out also.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you like to summarize something from the webpage, or?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I mean, I think if you have got the time to go through, first thing is have a look at those principles, and then at the useful tips. The useful tips are how to apply the principles, basically, how we can discuss together. And there you will find things like how to understand and respond. What is the difference between an understanding and a response? Mostly, we hear to repeat. We hear to respond. This is how we've really been habituated, and throughout our life. We're listening to a person, just waiting for the chance to give our response. So we're forming that response in our head immediately. We're not really listening to understand. That takes a little practice. That takes a little training, actually. So there's a difference, between the understanding and the response. So that you can read about in the useful tips. The importance of first understanding the person before you actually, give your response. You have to bracket your response. It may come up. They may say something. Oh, he's wrong, totally wrong. But you don't say that. Okay, you've got a different light. Bracket it. Keep it to one side. You'll get your chance. You'll get the talking stick in a minute. So just be patient. This trains you to be patient and tolerant. Brings you to the mode of goodness, actually. So understand the other person, and then reflect back. How to reflect back, what that means, and the courtesy tips. The language we use is very important. Have I understood you properly? Would you like to say more? Never use any negativity. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, I don't agree with that. How could you say that? Prabhupada didn't say that. All the cut down phrases that we use. Don't use anything like that. Discuss with humility, gratitude, mutual appreciation, and respect. We're trying to serve each other. We're like trying to help each other get closer to Krishna, get closer to Prabhupada. So mutual appreciation, recognize that Krishna is in everyone's heart. That person, he can speak to me through that person. We have children doing these discussions. I sit down in discussions with my own children quite often, and I'm astonished sometimes by the things they come up with. The realizations that they come up with, because Krishna is there. He can speak to anyone, through anyone rather. So all the different things are there. The body language, how to respond. Start your response with a question, so it keeps on track, so you don't go off on all kinds of tangents. So all these different things are there, and I would recommend have a look through that. And if you do find that this is something you'd like to explore, then you can also look at the video section on the website, where there are demonstrations of us doing these discussions, of my wife teaching it. She does most of the teaching. I'm a little busy these days with other things. I'm on the ISKCON Sabha, by the way. I don't know if you know what that is even.
Yeah.
The advisory body. So that kind of taking up a bit of my time lately, as well as my writing and things like that. But she's involved much more in the coaching and training. So you can see the videos, which are mostly of her, but there's some of me, and find out a bit more. And if you want to explore it, we're available to help. And you can connect with us, and especially it's so easy these days with Zoom and things like that. So yeah, we're very happy if you reach out.
That's so wonderful, Prabhu, for sharing all your insights and experience with that. And usually when I have these kind of interviews, we go through different questions about how to improve reading, but in some way you answered in so many ways already. And I think it becomes, sometimes we ask, what should we advise devotees if they have difficulties to read, how to overcome the obstacles? But I think your main message is really that reading together is really what helps.
Yeah, reading together, absolutely. Yeah, we need to come together. Read on your own by all means, yes, but don't neglect the discussions with other devotees, because that's so powerful.
Yeah, that came very clearly through in your message, and
yeah,
it's obviously a very, very powerful way to associate with each other.
It is the only way, really. We don't want to come together and talk Prajapa. Associating with devotees doesn't mean we meet together and talk about vaccinations or the latest politics or some crazy stuff. We talk Krishna Katha. Really. The best way to do that is to have Prabhupada's book there and just discuss his purports.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
I'm curious because about your service also as a writer. You have been, you like especially the retelling of the stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and recently or some years ago you started with this series.
The Bhagavatam. That's correct. Yeah.
Would you, in the light of what you just explained, would you like to explain? What is your motivation? Some you could say, well, there is already Prabhupada's books, and you just emphasized reading Prabhupada's books. But so, what is your motivation in compiling these books, and how they are kind of enhancing the experience of reading Prabhupada's books?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so you're just wondering why I wrote those books, and obviously I'm stressing that we should read Prabhupada's books, and here I am.
Someone would doubt maybe, like.
Yeah, so why should I read Krishna Dharma's books? Yeah, absolutely. Well, first the Mahabharata and the Ramayana were, I wrote those some time ago. I wasn't so much thinking of devotees when I wrote those. I was thinking more for the broader market, and they have had some appeal actually in that regard. But the devotees have also enjoyed them, it seems, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from devotees who do like reading those books. But the Bhagavatam is specifically aimed for devotees. The Brilliant as the Sun series. We've just published the 6th canto now, so we're working on the 7th. And the whole thing behind that is that we try to unpack the meaning, especially, we're working from Srila Prabhupada's books, obviously, and other commentaries by other acharyas. So to show the flow, to bring out the meaning, to dramatize it a little bit in order to make it more easy and accessible to read. And you'll see that we're constantly referring people back to Srila Prabhupada's books, and we say that we will consider our efforts in writing this book a success if, as a result of reading it, you end up studying Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, because he's the Bhagavat that you have to hear from, not us. We're not presenting ourselves as that at all. We're conditioned souls, so hearing from us won't help. But we're not presenting a commentary on the Bhagavatam. We're simply trying to present in our own words the meaning as we've understood it of Srila Prabhupada and other acharyas, and just make it. And it has worked. Devotees have given us that feedback that, wow, I'm feeling inspired to read the Bhagavatam now. After I've read it, I want to go back and look at Prabhupada's book, and we think, yes, that's what we're trying to do. And I think initially one of the key things that inspired us to do this particular book, the Brilliant as the Sun, was seeing that many devotees haven't read the Bhagavatam at all. They're just daunted by it. It's on the shelf, and they never pick it up because it's too much. And I can appreciate that. My own children haven't read it, haven't picked it up or read it. Certainly haven't read the CC, and maybe glanced at the Bhagavatam once or twice, or they've read it when we've sat down and done a discussion with them and obliged them to do so. Otherwise, it's just not part of their life at all, really. So we thought, well, what can we do to help get devotees to realize the splendor of the Bhagavatam, the incredible power of the Bhagavatam. It's there for the purpose of getting us out of this material world. So we thought, okay, well, let's try to present this as a bit of a retelling, so that's the whole real motive behind it.
In other words, basically, these books, they should help the devotees to develop a taste in the Bhagavatam, and then of course, naturally, they want to know more, then they will turn back to Prabhupada's books to get the Prabhupada's purports. But
Absolutely, that's right.
And they're also available as audiobooks, right?
Yes, they're all on Audible. I've done them myself. I've recorded them. So please have a listen. I mean, we've had a lot of I think more of the Audibles are sold than even the hard copies. It's very popular media today for absorbing content. So please have a listen and see what you think. But the thing about, I just mentioned briefly that the thing about the books that you won't get on Audible is that there's extensive notes in the back explaining our sources and everything else, and appendices as well, which you'll find useful in your study, which of course is not on the Audible.
Yeah. Wonderful. Slowly coming to an end of our conversation. One question I would like to ask maybe two, before we end. In what way would ISKCON be a different movement if actually every member would read daily? What would you think? How would it change our movement if actually devotees really become enthusiastic about reading Srila Prabhupada's books?
Well, I think it would be completely transformational. That I think currently we don't have enough. The culture of hearing and chanting needs to be very much improved, enhanced, because Srila Prabhupada is the foundational Shiksha Guru. The GBC have established that. They wrote that booklet about it, and we do different things to try and remind us of that, little ceremonies and things. Put Prabhupada, do his Guru Puja and everything. But the real way we can put Prabhupada in the center is his Shiksha. Get his Shiksha. He's the foundational Shiksha Guru. Okay, so how can we actualize that? How can we make that a fact of our life? Well, discuss his books together, come together. And I think if we do that, if we get Prabhupada much more in the center than he is now, then it will help to heal so many divisions that are coming up. That the movement's threatened with different fractures. Yourself, different possible divisions and splits are threatening us all the time over philosophical issues, this and that, so many things. Different camps are here and there, But Prabhupada is the central unifying factor that we have, that we all accept, and that can be realized through his Vani, his living presence in his books. So I can't stress personally enough that how much I believe this to be the answer to what we need right now is to put Prabhupada squarely in the center. Have a culture where people come to the temple. The first thing they do is introduce them to Prabhupada, to discussing his books, to forming their relationship with him before they even think about anything else, finding a guru or anything like that. You know, get that in place first. So there's work to be done, I think, in that regard. And that's part of our campaign here, our mission.
As well as ours. So
Yours too. Yeah, pleased to hear it from I'm very nice. It's very good that you contacted me, and I'm pleased to hear what you and put me in touch with any materials that you've got, anything that your websites and everything. We'll stay in touch.
Love to do that. Do we have any last final message you would like to share before we close?
Not really. I mean, I think I've said everything. Just I think I've made it clear how important it is to me, and I think to everyone to associate with Prabhupada through his books and especially discuss them. So the only thing I'd say is please do have a look at our website, and feel free to get in touch with us, and ask us if you have any questions about it, and we can help, we can coach, we can. And as soon as the pandemic eases up, maybe later this year when things are quietening down a bit, we're going to be doing a little traveling, so we'll come and give seminars and things like that too. So yeah, we're very happy to do that.
Thanks so much, Prabhu, for
Thank you.
Your enthusiasm about this topic and sharing all your deep insights. It was really very inspiring to listen to you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.